Now, unfortunately, often we don't think through this question, which is an evaluative question. What is education? If you conceive of education differently, have a different concept of what education is, it's going to ripple through everything else that is done. And so part of what we want to do as evaluators is make sure we're asking those ultimate evaluative questions which enable us to discipline all other evaluation. Suppose, for example, I answer, what is education, in this way. Education is the process of schooling whereby you pick up a smattering of information in a wide variety of subjects while moving to the point where ultimately you can get a job based on skills that you may or may not have learned in school. But the main idea behind school is to get a taste of a lot of things at a superficial level. And so now, if that's my evaluation of what education is about, then my job as a teacher is give that information. Your job as a student is to remember that information. So then, how should I test? Well, a test to see if you can repeat the information I gave you. So you get this sort of rippling through of everything else of these ultimate evaluations. So the ultimate evaluations are very crucial, and by the way, if you're asking the question, what is education, you won't be able to answer this well unless you think, what's the purpose of life? What's the value of life? Where are we going? What is it to live a good life, a just life, a life worth living? But you'll find, by the way, that those who engage in evaluation often haven't thought through their ultimate values. And their evaluation suffers. I mean this as a practical matter, not as a theoretical, wouldn't it be nice matter, but that there are practical consequences to having poorly thought through the value system that you're using. And I find that here is part of what I hear very often from educators. They're not interested in these so-called big questions because they say that's not practical. They want to start on a practical level. They want to say, just tell me what to do. Let's get down to the action item. But action always ultimately depends on value choices. And we have to be clear about our values and our evaluation, which is a product of that. Okay, so what am I saying? Evaluation is everywhere. Evaluation is a function of thinking. Thinking has structures. Evaluation has those same structures. Values fit into values. And any position you take on sort of the most immediate values, they're going to be connected with broader values, which are connected with broader values. So let's take this evaluative question. What should I do in my class today? What's the best thing to do today? Well, what did you do yesterday? What did you accomplish yesterday? What did you fail to accomplish yesterday? Now, next level, what are you trying to accomplish in this class? Now, next level, what are you trying to accomplish as a teacher? What are your fundamental goals as a teacher? Now, that's a hair's breadth away from what is education to you. And when you describe what you're after as a teacher, aren't you, to some extent, describing what you're after as a person? Your sense of what life is about, what is important in life, what is not important in life, what is worth pursuing, what is not worth pursuing. So in some sense, without being pedantic or academic or up in the clouds, we have to realize that the judgments we're making on a day-to-day basis are reflecting bigger judgments that we're making. And if we're mucking up those bigger judgments, we're going to have problems all the way through. Now I want to mention the fact that ultimately thinking and its quality depends on universal standards, intellectual standards. And as you know, many of those who've made presentations at this conference have pointed out how rare teachers tend to explicitly use these standards. What are they? I mean, here are some of them. This isn't all, but this is a very basic collection. Clarity, accuracy, precision, relevance, depth, breadth, and logic. What do they have to do with? They have to do with the ultimate evaluation of any thinking whatsoever, independent of what it's thinking about. For example, suppose you got a book on history written by a historical thinker, and you said, whatever else is true of this, it's unclear, inaccurate, irrelevant, superficial, narrow-minded, and illogical. But besides that, it has many merits. It's very hard to have merits when it has these kinds of problems, because these are ultimate intellectual standards. These standards need no justification, because if you say they need a justification, it's only because you don't understand them. You see, take clarity. Suppose I give you an unclear explanation. You say, this is not clear to me. Could you explain it further? I say, what is this fetish for clarity? I don't understand why. What is your, give me an argument in favor of this. Well, you could say, well, if you haven't clearly explained, then I will not clearly understand. And I say, so what? Again, you're presupposing clarity. To understand clarity is to know its value. It's ultimate. The same thing goes for accuracy. Why do you want accurate information? Why not inaccurate information? See, why do you want us in the discussion to stick to the issue? I mean, why not just wander all over the place and touch a little bit on this and a little bit on that? So what we have to see is when you get to ultimate evaluation, there are ultimate standards. Now, again, I say if one is not clear at the ultimate level, one is not going to be clear at the concrete everyday level. So at the concrete everyday level, students are not learning these standards. Therefore, all of their reasoning has problems. Because what can they do with the whole notion of what thinking means? Now you say, well, we have rubrics. We don't use these things, we use rubrics. Well, what are rubrics? They are domain-specific standards that somebody cooked up. So we could say in the Olympics there are rubrics for each event. There is certain heights of the bar and so forth, but there also is excellence of a general sort in the fitness of the body. General excellence. So if you see those bodies in the Olympics, they all look similar with respect to certain very broad qualities of fitness, because these are sort of the undergirding underneath all of the domain-specific stuff, things that are universal beyond the stuff that is non-universal. So what do we have to do? We have to make sure that when we're doing an evaluation, that we assess our rubrics for their clarity, for their accuracy, for their precision, for their relevance, and so forth and so on. Rubrics are not ultimate. They have to themselves be assessed. And these are the ultimate tools of assessment. So if we're going to have good assessment in education, what am I saying so far? Teachers and administrators and anyone doing assessment, including students, if they're expected to do assessment, and they should be, have got to be clear about the difference between preference and evaluation. They have to understand the basic structures of thinking, which are unavoidable in thinking. Why? Because that's the only thing they can use to learn, their thinking. They don't have anything else. And if they're using poor thinking when they're learning, they're not going to be good learners. So if there are structures you can't avoid using when you're learning, it's useful to know what those structures are. Then, if there are standards that undergird all evaluation, it's in the student's interest, it's our interest to make sure we know those standards, because if we don't have those standards clearly in mind, we're apt to ignore them in ways that are to our detriment. For example, you've gone to meetings. All of us have gone to meetings. Most meetings violate these standards all over the place. And the persons who conduct the meetings and participate in the meetings very often don't think of the logic of the meeting. What is the purpose? Why are we here? For example, let me give you the logic of a lot of meetings that I've been at, and with almost nobody noticing this. The logic of the meeting is this. We meet together at this time because we've always met together at this time. And we have an agenda, and in the agenda we list information items first, and then we put the important problems at the end. So we won't have time for them. So that we'll have to rush through them. Then, for every item in the agenda, everyone should put in their 2 cents, even though it has nothing to do ultimately with any decision we have to make. So what does it become? It becomes extremely ineffective. So I'm known on this campus as someone who tends to say, in the early part of the meeting, I move we adjourn. All of these items could have been put in my mailbox. I could have read them. I didn't need them to be read to me. It's not an effective way to get information out. Or let's go to the action items. Let's go to the important issues. Let's deal with them first. Another example, because again, I want to suggest we're talking about what is really practical here. For 3 years, I was on a committee called, what was it called? Educational Policies Council. We never, ever discussed educational policy. Never. It was always, do we approve this, do we not approve that? It was a kind of concrete decision. We didn't know the policies. All the policies were ad hoc, unexpressed, and we went, this committee went like this. It went in almost any direction as the committee members changed. And so, you know, you had political maneuvering to get somebody on the committee to push it in this direction or that direction. Usually vested interest was the fundamental purpose, to protect the vested interest of whatever group you represented. But that's not educational policy, that's political warfare. So the logic was denied, and the end result was, well, for me, I just got off the thing and I said, this is not a good use of my time. I don't want to participate in activities where we say we're doing one thing and we're actually doing another thing, and we're sort of engaging in, I guess I'd have to say, something intellectually dishonest. So I think this has to do with practical assessment of how you're going to spend your time.